Shabbat Shalom. Every morning I drive our two boys to school, and we have about 8 minutes in the car between our house and the Littman School at the JCC, in which the great debate is, what music will we be listening to? This week, a song came on the radio from West Side Story, a song that the boys don't know, but Noah, our almost 8-year-old, really took to it. He loved it, as he often does with Broadway. But I said to him, I was like, this is a song that was recorded while they were singing this live to an audience of people all in a big space together, because when you go to hear and see a Broadway musical, it's a whole event. To which Ezra, our mathematician and pragmatist, said, but that makes no sense. Why would you go somewhere and be in a big room with lots of people when you could just listen to the song on the radio? It makes no sense. The Torah portion this week, the Israelites are out in the wilderness. God asks them to give gifts in the middle of the desert. They've just made it out of slavery, and now they've got to give what they brought with them away. It makes no sense. What's the purpose? Aren't they on a journey? Aren't they supposed to be going somewhere? Why would they need to give God of all beings gifts? And yet, when we look at our own lives, we do this all the time. How often do we find that we fill our lives with things that we don't need? We thirst for things, we request things, we want things to be bigger, more plentiful, grandiose in our life, like a Broadway musical. We want it to be nice. There's actually a term for this. It's called the Diderot effect. It was coined by Dennis Diderot, who wrote a story about how he received a beautiful robe. And in the story, once he receives the robe and goes to his very modest home, he notices that the robe is so much nicer than his furniture, so he has to, of course, get new furniture. He notices that his carpets are all raggedy, so he buys new rugs that are as nice as the robe he wears. I had a friend who, just a few years ago, had a very similar thing happen, much like we all do. She needed to replace some carpet in her living room because someone had spilled wine. And so they went searching for new carpet. And they put the carpet in and they said, yeah, but we should also get a chair. It would go really well with the new carpet. And before you knew it, they were repainting, refurnishing, renovating their entire living room. Diderot explains how new consumption often leads to further consumption. But more than that, he argues that we start to identify with our possessions and search for new things that fit into this new specific mold that we have found. It's something that I imagine all of us have experienced. We buy one new thing, and it leads to 10 new things. Is that what God is asking for this week in the Torah portion that Cantor Kathy will read in a few moments? God says, bring gifts from everyone whose heart so moves them. And then a long list of all the gifts God is requesting of silver and gold, of acacia wood. Is God just obsessed with things? I think we have to look at this and understand that just as it's contagious to find that we want to buy more things, that there must be a purpose to what is in our Torah this week. That if the power of purchasing can be contagious, then we must also believe that such a power can be contagiously good for us. But how so? Can objects change us somehow? Does it matter that the space we're in is nicer, that we hear music inside a beautiful theater with actors dancing, singing the very same music we could hear beautifully on the radio? There's a story of a teenage young woman, a junior in high school. Her name was Emily Caulfield. She wrote that she always found it difficult to express her feelings because she stuttered. And then she would forget her point. And she would get stuck in her mind. And she'd find that she couldn't say anything, and she could hear the kids around her starting to giggle and laugh until she discovered art. She wrote, "I had so much to say, but I was unable to speak because I was worried the words would squeak out of my mouth." And so she found that art could be her voice. At an art show, she was admiring a painting of a woman and her 2 children, and next to her was an older woman. She asked her, "Do you like it?" The woman spoke back in a language that Emily didn't understand. But she smiled. And even though they spoke different languages, the painting brought them together. When she found art, she said, "I was so hungry to express my dreams and wished people could appreciate the power of what I saw, and that they could understand that there's more than one side to seeing things. By teaching myself to view pieces with different perspectives," she said, "I create a space in which I am able to carry these ideals into my life, now and in the future. The world we live in doesn't encourage thoughtfulness," she said, "but amongst all this chaos, I hope that others find themselves in the art as well." She became a photographer. And she shared her photography with people so that her voice was in the room without her ever sharing a word. Simon Schama, a wonderful documentarian and author, wrote that the power of the greatest art is the power to shake us into revelation, rip us from our default mode of seeing. After an encounter with such a force, we don't look at a face, a color, a sky, a body in quite the same way again. We get fitted with new sight, with what he says is insight, because visions of beauty or a rush of intense pleasure are part of that process, but so too may be shock and pain and desire and pity, even revulsion. That kind of art seems to have rewired our senses, and we apprehend the world differently. And so I want to ask you to look around the room that you're in, your home. What is it that you can look at that helps to define that space and, God willing, to make it a sacred space for you, a space that allows you to look at the world with a different perspective? Because this year we've had more time than most in our homes. More time than we ever thought we would have staring at these walls, looking out the same windows. But this week, God looks out at the Israelites and asks them for gifts, not because God needs things, I believe, but because God wants the Israelites to have an inspiring view. Because, as the Torah portion later says, "I need you to build a sanctuary." Why do we go to Broadway to hear music when we can hear the very same notes on the radio? Because when you sit in certain spaces and see certain things, the world is changed. That's the gift of art. It's the gift of a sanctuary in the wilderness. Without it, you very well may be able to eat or sleep and find shelter, to solve all the pragmatic problems that we know we need to solve every day. But with it, with the view of these gifts, you realize that the space you are in is not just there to protect you, that it's a holy space, and the world outside your window has a lot more to offer than a single view. This week, let's hear these words from Torah, listen to the cantor chant them, and let's notice the world around us. Let it change us, broaden our perspective, see what we haven't seen before, and as Abraham Joshua Heschel often said, live with the spirituality of awe and wonder, constantly curious about what comes next. We'll turn now to our Torah portion